In this episode of True Crimes Unfold, we unpack the case involving a vanishing TikTok star. A mysterious dream leads to a gruesome discovery, and a tale of jealousy and betrayal unfolds in Thailand's most unexpected true crime story. Please note that events and scenarios in this video may be graphic for some viewers. Discretion is advised. Details of the videos are taken from actual case files. Before we begin, let us know in the comments where you're listening from, what type of cases you'd like us to cover next, and we'll make sure to add them to our list. And don't forget to subscribe to get new stories as soon as they're released. Now settle in, get ready, and let's begin. In the bustling streets of Bangkok, where life moves as fast as the motorbikes weaving through traffic, one young woman's absence became a void felt across social media. Thuzar Ong, affectionately known as Sa, was more than just a rising TikTok star. She was a beacon of hope and positivity for thousands. But on a seemingly ordinary day in August 2023, Sa vanished without a trace, leaving her followers and loved ones in a state of shock and despair. So wasn't your average TikTok influencer. Born in Myanmar and working in Thailand as a migrant laborer, she embodied resilience and determination. Her cheerful personality, infectious dance routines, and heartfelt stories about navigating life in a foreign country resonated with her growing audience. For many, Sa was more than an entertainer. She was an inspiration. She always lit up the room, a close friend recalled. Her smile could make you forget your worries. That's why her disappearance was so hard to comprehend. Sa's online presence was a stark contrast to the harsh realities she faced as a migrant worker. Through her content, she brought joy to others while silently enduring the challenges of a life far from home. But behind the scenes, a storm was brewing, one that would change everything. On August 1st, Sa left her apartment for what should have been an ordinary outing. Dressed in her usual colorful attire and carrying her signature phone tripod, she told friends she was heading out to meet someone. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. When Sa failed to return home that evening, her friends grew worried. Calls to her phone went unanswered, and her usually active TikTok account fell eerily silent. By the next morning, panic had set in. Sa's friends reported her missing to the authorities. But in a city as vast and chaotic as Bangkok, finding one missing person felt like searching for a needle in a haystack. As days turned into weeks, Sa's disappearance became a haunting mystery. Her friends plastered posters across the city and shared frantic pleas for information online. The hashtag The Finzer began trending, drawing attention from both her followers and strangers who were captivated by her story. Local news outlets picked up the case, framing it as a heartbreaking tale of a young woman whose light had been extinguished too soon. But even as public interest grew, tangible leads were frustratingly scarce. It was as if Sa had vanished into thin air. Behind the scenes, her loved ones clung to hope. She wouldn't just leave like this, her roommate insisted. Something must have happened to her. As investigators dug deeper, a troubling picture began to emerge. Witnesses came forward, claiming to have seen Sa in the company of her ex-boyfriend, Nai, on the day she disappeared. Nai, a reserved and brooding figure, had a history of controlling behavior. Their relationship had ended months earlier, But Nai's lingering obsession with Sa was no secret to those who knew them. Everyone warned her about him, a friend revealed. He had this dark energy, like he couldn't handle the idea of her moving on without him. When police questioned Nai, his responses were evasive. He admitted to meeting Sa that day, but claimed they parted ways shortly afterward. However, inconsistencies in his story and the discovery of Sa's personal belongings near his home raised suspicions. Forensic teams began scouring Nai's property, searching for answers to the question on everyone's mind. Where was Sa? The breakthrough in the case came not from hard evidence, but from a chilling twist. An investigative journalist named Kit had a vivid dream about Sa. In the dream, Kit saw a secluded area near Nai's home, a place she had never visited in real life. Compelled by an unshakable intuition, Kit shared her vision with the authorities. What happened next defied explanation. Acting on Kit's description, police searched the area and made a grisly discovery. Sa's lifeless body, hidden in a shallow grave. The scene was harrowing, her once vibrant presence reduced to a tragic statistic. "It's like she guided us to her," Kit said in an emotional interview. "I can't explain it, but I'm grateful we found her, even if it was too late." News of Sa's death sent shockwaves through the TikTok community and beyond. Fans flooded her account with messages of grief and disbelief, mourning the loss of a young woman who had brought so much joy into their lives. The hashtag #Justice for Sa began trending, with followers demanding accountability for the person responsible for her death. For Sa's friends and family, the discovery brought a mixture of relief and devastation. They finally had answers. But the reality of her fate was almost too much to bear. "She didn't deserve this," her brother said through tears. "She had so much life left to live." As the investigation continued, the spotlight turned to Nai and his potential involvement in Sa's death. What had driven him to such a monstrous act? Was it jealousy, rage, or something even darker? The questions hung heavy in the air, fueling a nationwide obsession with the case. As investigators peeled back the layers of Tuzar Ong's life, they uncovered a story far more complex than anyone had imagined. Behind Sa's radiant smile and TikTok stardom lay a troubled history, and at the heart of it was Nai, an ex-boyfriend whose obsession would cast a long shadow. Sa's journey to social media fame was anything but easy. Born into a modest family in Myanmar, she moved to Thailand in search of better opportunities. Like many migrant workers, Sa faced long hours, low pay, and societal prejudice. But through it all, she found solace in her creativity. Her TikTok videos were her escape, a way to share joy, connect with others, and carve out a space where she could shine. Sa was unstoppable, a close friend shared. She turned her struggles into strength. That's what made her so special. But her growing popularity came with its own set of challenges. As her follower account climbed, so did the scrutiny of her personal life. One figure loomed large in her past. Nai, a man who couldn't let her go. Nai was the polar opposite of Sa's vibrant personality. Quiet, intense, and deeply insecure, he struggled to accept Sa's growing independence after their breakup. Friends described him as possessive, someone who viewed Sa not as a partner, but as an extension of himself. He couldn't handle the idea of her moving on. A mutual friend recalled, he would show up uninvited, call her constantly, and even threaten her when she tried to set boundaries. The final straw came when Sa ended the relationship for good, hoping to focus on her career and rebuild her life. But Nai refused to accept her decision. His obsession with Sa only grew. On August 1st, Nai contacted Sa under the guise of reconciliation. He claimed he wanted to apologize for his past behavior and hoped they could part on good terms. Despite her reservations, Sa agreed to meet him, believing it was an opportunity to close a painful chapter in her life. That decision would prove fatal. Witnesses saw Sa and Nai together at a local cafe that afternoon. According to the cafe staff, the interaction seemed tense. Sa appeared uncomfortable, while Nai's demeanor was cold and calculated. From there, the pair was seen heading toward Nai's apartment, where Sa would later be murdered. As investigators focused on Nai, another figure entered the picture. His mother, Chan. Described by neighbors as a reserved and devout woman, Chan initially seemed an unlikely accomplice. But as the investigation deepened, her involvement in the case became harder to ignore. Chan had been fiercely protective of Nai, often excusing his behavior and shielding him from consequences. This dynamic extended to Sa, whom Chan reportedly viewed as a threat to her son's happiness. She would always defend him, no matter what, a neighbor revealed. It's like she believed he could do no wrong. Evidence soon emerged that suggested Chan knew more about Sa's disappearance than she had let on. Phone records placed her near Nai's apartment on the evening of August 1st, and forensic evidence linked her to the scene where Sa's body was found. The motive behind Sa's murder became increasingly clear: jealousy and control. Nai couldn't accept that Sa had moved on, not just from him, but from the life he had envisioned for her. Her growing fame and independence were threats to his fragile ego, pushing him to commit an unthinkable act. Experts who analyzed the case described Nai's behavior as indicative of coercive control, a pattern of psychological manipulation often used by abusers to dominate their victims. This wasn't about love, one psychologist explained. It was about power. Nai wanted to control Sa, and when he couldn't, he sought to destroy her. As police built their case against Nai, the evidence was damning. Surveillance footage. Cameras captured Nai and Sa entering his apartment building together, but only Nai was seen leaving. Blood evidence. Traces of Sa's blood were found on Nai's clothing and in his car, suggesting he had transported her body after the murder. Digital clues. Messages retrieved from Sa's phone revealed a history of threats and harassment from Nai, further establishing his motive. But perhaps the most chilling piece of evidence was a journal found in Nai's apartment. In it, he had written detailed plans for disposing of a body, complete with diagrams and lists of tools. The discovery painted a picture of premeditation that left little doubt about his guilt. As pressure mounted, Nai's mother, Chan, began to crack. Her initial statements to police were filled with contradictions, and she struggled to account for her whereabouts on the night of Sa's murder. Investigators suspected she had helped Nai cover up the crime, either out of loyalty or fear. Under interrogation, Chan admitted to seeing Sa at the apartment, but claimed she had no involvement in her death. "I didn't want this to happen," She reportedly said, "I just wanted my son to be happy." Her confession, while incomplete, was enough to implicate her in the cover-up. The once devout mother now faced the prospect of being tried alongside her son for a crime that had shocked the nation. As details of Sa's murder came to light, public outrage grew. Social media erupted with demands for justice, with followers flooding Sa's TikTok account with tributes and condolences. For many, her story was a tragic reminder of the dangers faced by women who dare to assert their independence in the face of controlling partners. She was so much more than a victim, a fan wrote on Instagram. Sa was a fighter, a dreamer, and a light in this world. We won't let her story be forgotten. With Nai in custody and Chan under suspicion, the investigation turned toward unraveling the full extent of their involvement. Were they acting alone, or did others help conceal the crime? And what could have been done to prevent such a senseless loss? As these questions lingered, one thing became clear. Sa's story was far from over. Her death had sparked a national conversation about gender-based violence, coercive control, and the need for systemic change to protect vulnerable individuals. As the investigation into Tuzar Ong's tragic death deepened, forensic experts worked tirelessly to uncover the truth behind her final moments. The trail of evidence left behind by Nai, her obsessed ex-boyfriend, painted a harrowing picture of premeditation, jealousy, and cold-blooded violence. But it was the meticulous work of investigators and forensic scientists that ultimately brought justice for Sa. The discovery of Sa's body in a shallow grave near Nai's family home shocked even the most seasoned investigators. Her remains, wrapped in a makeshift tarp, bore signs of a violent struggle. Forensic analysis revealed bruises on her arms and neck, consistent with a physical altercation. The cause of death was determined to be asphyxiation, likely the result of manual strangulation. This was a deeply personal act of violence, a forensic pathologist explained. The injuries suggest a level of rage and control that points directly to the perpetrator's mindset. Near the burial site, investigators found tools that had been hastily discarded. Shovels, gloves, and a small knife, all bearing traces of Sa's DNA. The discovery of these items not only corroborated Nai's involvement, but also hinted at the possibility of an accomplice. In today's age, technology often leaves behind a trail of breadcrumbs, and this case was no exception. Sa's phone, recovered near the burial site, became a crucial piece of evidence in unraveling the events leading up to her death. Text messages. Sa's phone contained a series of chilling messages from Nai in the weeks before her disappearance. He repeatedly begged her to meet, alternating between pleas for forgiveness and veiled threats. In one message, Nai ominously wrote, "You'll regret ignoring me." Location data. GPS data from Sa's phone placed her at Nai's apartment on the afternoon of August 1st, corroborating witness accounts. The phone's signal went dark shortly after, suggesting it had been intentionally disabled. Search history. Nai's phone also provided damning evidence. In the days leading up to the murder, he had searched for terms like how to hide a body and fastest way to dig a grave. These chilling searches highlighted his premeditation and left no room for doubt about his intentions. While digital evidence provided a window into Nai's mindset, Surveillance footage offered a visual timeline of the crime. Cameras from Nai's apartment complex captured Sa entering the building around 2 p.m. on August 1st. She appeared hesitant, her body language tense, but she followed Nai inside. Hours later, Nai was seen leaving the building alone. He carried a large duffel bag and wore a cap pulled low over his face. This was the last time Sa was seen alive. Further footage from a nearby convenience store showed Nai purchasing cleaning supplies and gloves that investigators later recovered from the burial site. The timestamps on these recordings aligned perfectly with the timeline of Sa's disappearance, adding another layer of incriminating. As investigators pieced together the evidence, it became increasingly clear that Nai's mother, Chan, had played a role in covering up the crime. While her exact involvement remained murky, forensic evidence linked her to key aspects of the case. Forensic matches. Fibers from Chan's clothing were found on the tarp used to wrap Sa's body, suggesting she had helped prepare or transport the remains. Conflicting testimony. Chan initially claimed she had no knowledge of Sa's death, but phone records placed her near the burial site on the evening of August 1st. Confronted with this evidence, she admitted to being present but insisted she had been coerced by Nai. Family dynamics. Psychological profiles suggested that Chan's unwavering loyalty to her son may have blinded her to the severity of his actions. Experts theorized that she had enabled Nai's behavior for years, creating an environment where he felt entitled to act without consequence. Under mounting pressure from the overwhelming evidence, Nai eventually confessed to the murder. In a cold and detached tone, he described how he had lured Sa to his apartment under the pretense of reconciliation. When she attempted to leave, he claimed, he lost control. "I didn't mean for it to happen," Nai told investigators. "But she kept trying to leave, and I couldn't let her." His confession, while incomplete, aligned with the forensic evidence. Nai admitted to strangling Sa in a fit of rage and later enlisting his mother's help to dispose of her body. He maintained, however, that the crime was not premeditated, a claim starkly contradicted by his internet searches and detailed notes on body disposal. Forensic psychologists brought in to analyze Nai painted a disturbing picture of his mindset. They described him as a classic case of coercive control, a form of abuse characterized by manipulation, isolation, and an overwhelming need for dominance. Nai viewed Sa not as a partner, but as property, one psychologist explained. When she asserted her independence, it shattered his sense of control, triggering a violent and irreversible response. Jane's role in enabling Nai's behavior was also scrutinized. Experts noted that her overprotective parenting style likely contributed to Nai's inability to handle rejection or failure, creating a dangerous dynamic that culminated in tragedy. The forensic evidence presented during the trial was damning. Nai's internet searches, the surveillance footage, and the physical evidence from the burial site left no room for reasonable doubt. Coupled with his confession, the case against him was airtight. Chan too faced charges of accessory to murder, while her defense argued that she had acted out of fear and coercion. The evidence suggested a more active role in the cover-up. Both mother and son were ultimately convicted, with Nai receiving a life sentence and Chan sentenced to 15 years. Sa's death and the subsequent trial captivated Thailand, sparking widespread discussions about domestic violence, gender-based abuse, and the vulnerabilities of migrant workers. Her story resonated with people across the country, uniting them in grief and a shared determination to prevent similar tragedies. "We can't bring her back," a social activist said during a memorial service, "but we can honor her memory by fighting for a world where women like Sa are protected, supported, and free to live their lives without fear." While Sa's life was tragically cut short, her story continues to inspire change. Advocacy groups have used her case to push for stronger protections for migrant workers, greater awareness of coercive control, and expanded mental health resources for those at risk of abusive relationships. For her followers, Sa remains a symbol of resilience and hope, a young woman who touched countless lives through her creativity and determination. Her legacy, they say, is a reminder to cherish the light in others and to fight against the darkness that seeks to extinguish it. As the case against Nai and his mother, Chan, moved to trial, the world watched with bated breath. The courtroom became a battleground for truth and accountability, with prosecutors presenting damning evidence, defense attorneys painting a picture of coercion and mental instability, and the grieving loved ones of Thuzar Ong Sa demanding justice for a life cut tragically short. From the outset, the prosecution laid out a meticulously constructed narrative of premeditation and betrayal. Their goal was to prove that Nai's actions were not a momentary lapse in judgment, but a calculated act of violence rooted in jealousy and control. Evidence of premeditation. Nai's incriminating internet searches in the days leading up to Sa's murder were a focal point of the prosecution's argument. Terms like "how to hide a body" and "quickest way to dig a grave" were presented as clear indicators of intent. The journal found in Nai's apartment, which contained step-by-step plans for disposing of a body, further solidified the argument that he had planned the murder in advance. Surveillance and forensic evidence. Surveillance footage showing Nai and Sa entering his apartment together and Nai leaving alone hours later with a duffel bag was a pivotal piece of evidence. Combined with forensic findings such as Sa's blood on Nai's clothing and in his car, the physical evidence painted an undeniable picture of his guilt. Emotional testimonies. Assay's friends and family took the stand, providing emotional accounts of her vibrant personality and the torment she endured at Nai's hands. Their testimonies highlighted her resilience and independence, which prosecutors argued were motives for Nai's controlling behavior. Nai's defense team faced an uphill battle, but they sought to create reasonable doubt by portraying him as a troubled individual, acting out of emotional instability rather than calculated malice. Claim of impulse. The defense argued that Sa's death was the result of an impulsive act during an argument, not a premeditated murder. They pointed to Nai's psychological profile, describing him as someone with severe emotional dysregulation and an inability to handle rejection. Focus on mental health. Psychologists hired by the defense testified that Nai's actions were driven by a psychological break, exacerbated by years of parental overprotection and an unhealthy attachment to Sa. They claimed he lacked the emotional tools to cope with her independence. Shifting blame. In a controversial move, the defense suggested that Chan, Nai's mother, may have played a more significant role in the crime than initially believed. while they stopped short of accusing her of direct. Chan's presence in the courtroom was as polarizing as it was critical. Her defense painted her as a mother acting out of fear and desperation, coerced into helping her son cover up a crime she did not condone. However, the prosecution sought to prove that her actions went beyond mere compliance. Conflicting testimonies. Chan's statements during interrogation were inconsistent, and under cross-examination, her narrative began to crumble. While she claimed she had no knowledge of the murder until after the fact, evidence placed her near Nai's apartment at the time of the crime. Forensic evidence. Fibers from Chan's clothing were found on the tarp used to wrap Sa's body, and her fingerprints were detected on the tools used to bury the remains. The prosecution argued that this proved her active involvement in the cover-up. The question of loyalty. Psychological experts describe Chan's dynamic with Nai as one of unhealthy dependency. Her unwavering loyalty to her son, they argued, blinded her to the severity of his actions and led her to prioritize his protection over justice for Sa. Throughout the trial, the courtroom was charged with emotion. Sa's family, seated in the front row, listened intently as the details of her final moments were recounted in excruciating detail. Her mother, tears streaming down her face, clutched a photo of Sa, a constant reminder of the young woman they had lost. "She was my everything," her mother said during a brief statement. "I want the world to remember her for her kindness, her strength, and her light, not for the way her life was taken." For Sa's fans and supporters, the trial became a rallying cry for justice. Crowds gathered outside the courthouse daily, holding signs with messages like "Mass Justice for Sa" and a "Stop Gender Violence," demanding accountability for the crime and systemic change to protect women from similar fates. After weeks of testimony, evidence, and emotional appeals, the jury reached a unanimous verdict. Nai was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge described his actions as an egregious violation of trust and humanity, emphasizing the premeditated nature of the crime. Chan, meanwhile, was convicted of being an accessory to murder and received a 15-year sentence. While the court acknowledged her claims of coercion, the evidence of her active participation in the cover-up ultimately outweighed her defense. The sentences brought a measure of closure to Sa's family, though the pain of her loss remained. "This is not the justice we wanted," her brother said outside the courthouse. "But it's the justice we have." The trial's conclusion marked a turning point in Thailand's conversation about domestic violence, coercive control, and the vulnerability of migrant workers. Advocacy groups used the case as a platform to push for stronger protections and systemic reforms. Domestic violence awareness. Say's story highlighted the dangers of coercive control, a form of abuse often overlooked in discussions of domestic violence. Campaigns aimed at educating the public about this issue gained significant traction, with calls for better legal protections for victims. Migrant worker rights. As a migrant worker, Say's story resonated with many others in similar positions, drawing attention to the unique challenges and vulnerabilities faced by this community. Activists demanded improved labor protections, access to mental health resources, and greater societal support for migrant workers. Cultural reflection. The case also sparked a broader conversation about societal attitudes toward gender and power. For many, Essay's death was a wake-up call about the need to challenge patriarchal norms and create a culture of respect and equality. While the trial brought justice to Sa's family, her story continues to inspire change. Her life, though tragically short, left a lasting impact on those who knew her and the countless others who followed her journey online. She was more than just a victim, one fan wrote on social media. She was a symbol of hope, resilience, and the power of community. Her light will never be forgotten. The trial of Nayan Chan may have ended, but the story of Tuzar Ong is far from over. Her death serves as a stark reminder of the dangers faced by women in abusive relationships and the systemic gaps that allow such tragedies to occur. But it also represents the strength of a community, united in grief and determination, fighting to ensure that Sa's legacy will be one of change, justice, and hope. Tuzar Ong's death was more than a personal tragedy. It was a cultural reckoning. Her case sent shockwaves through Thailand and beyond, sparking conversations about domestic violence, societal pressures, and the vulnerabilities faced by women and migrant workers. Sa's story became a catalyst for change, pushing individuals, communities, and policymakers to confront uncomfortable truths and take meaningful action. Say's murder shed light on the pervasive issue of domestic violence, particularly the insidious form of abuse known as coercive control. While physical abuse often garners immediate attention, coercive control, marked by manipulation, intimidation, and domination, remains less understood but equally damaging. Awareness campaigns, advocacy groups seized on Say's story to launch nationwide awareness campaigns. Billboards, social media posts, and public service announcements emphasize the warning signs of coercive control, such as isolating a partner from friends and family, or using emotional blackmail to maintain power. Legal protections. SA's case exposed gaps in Thailand's legal framework for addressing domestic violence. Activists called for expanded definitions of abuse to include non-physical forms of control, as well as stronger penalties for perpetrators. Community support. Organizations began offering workshops and resources to help individuals recognize and escape abusive relationships. Helplines reported an increase in calls from women seeking advice, many of whom cited Sa's story as their inspiration to seek help. As a migrant worker, Sa's story also highlighted the unique challenges faced by individuals navigating life in a foreign country. While her social media success made her a public figure, her experiences were emblematic of the struggles endured by countless others. Economic exploitation. Sa, like many migrant workers, took on low-paying jobs with long hours and little security. Her aspirations to build a better life through her TikTok platform resonated with others who faced similar barriers to success. Social vulnerabilities. Migrant workers are often isolated from support systems, making them particularly vulnerable to exploitation and abuse. Say's death sparked calls for greater protections, including access to legal aid, housing support, and mental health resources. Policy reforms. Advocacy groups pushed for changes to labor laws, including better enforcement of workplace protections and pathways to citizenship for long-term migrants. SA's case became a rallying cry for ensuring that no one is left unprotected, regardless of their background. At its core, SR's story was about power and control, issues deeply rooted in patriarchal norms that perpetuate gender inequality. Her death became a wake-up call for Thailand to examine and challenge these societal structures. Education and outreach. Schools and community organizations began incorporating lessons on gender equality and healthy relationships into their programs. SA's story was often used as an example to spark dialogue among young people about the dangers of toxic masculinity and the importance of mutual respect. Empowering women. Women's organizations used SA's case to advocate for greater representation in leadership positions, both in government and the private sector. The belief was clear: empowering women is key to dismantling systems of inequality. Public discourse. Saw's story fueled conversations in media and popular culture about the intersection of gender, power, and violence. From television dramas to online forums, her case became a touchstone for discussing the changes needed to create a more equitable society. Social media was both a platform for Saw's success and a tool for seeking justice in the wake of her death. The same digital space that helped her connect with thousands of followers also became a rallying point for those demanding accountability. Amplifying her story. Hashtags like #Justice for Say and Nas Stop Gender Violence trended globally, ensuring that her story reached audiences far beyond Thailand. Influencers, celebrities, and everyday users shared her videos, turning her into a symbol of resilience and hope. Holding systems accountable. Online movements pressured authorities to prioritize SA's case, ensuring that her death would not be dismissed or forgotten. Public scrutiny played a significant role in keeping the investigation transparent and thorough. A platform for change. Say's story inspired others to share their own experiences with abuse and inequality, fostering a sense of solidarity and collective action. Her followers transformed their grief into advocacy, using social media as a tool for raising awareness and demanding reform. The impact of Saw's case extended to the highest levels of government. Policymakers, under pressure from advocacy groups and the public, began taking steps to address the systemic issues her story brought to light. Legislative changes. New bills were introduced to strengthen protections for domestic violence survivors, expand definitions of abuse, and increase penalties for offenders. The government also committed to funding shelters and counseling services for victims. Police training. Law enforcement agencies implemented mandatory training programs to help officers recognize and respond to coercive control and other forms of non-physical abuse. These measures aim to ensure that future cases would be handled with greater sensitivity and urgency. Support for migrant workers. Say's case highlighted the need for better protections for migrant workers, leading to the establishment of new support centers and the creation of a hotline specifically for reporting exploitation and abuse. Beyond policy changes, Say's story sparked a broader cultural shift in how Thailand approaches issues of gender, power, and abuse. Her life and legacy challenged societal norms, inspiring individuals to reflect on their own roles in perpetuating or dismantling inequality. Inspiring action. Say's followers, many of whom were young women, took her story as a call to action. From organizing awareness events to volunteering with advocacy groups, they found ways to honor her legacy by fighting for change. Reframing the narrative. In the aftermath of her death, Sa was remembered not just as a victim, but as a trailblazer who defied the odds and brought joy to countless lives. Her story became a testament to the power of resilience and the importance of standing up against injustice. A legacy of hope. Sa's life, though tragically short, left an enduring impact on those who knew her and those who followed her journey. Her story continues to inspire conversations, reforms, and a collective commitment to building a more just and equitable society. While the pain of Sa's loss will never fully fade, her story has become a beacon of hope for countless others. It is a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable tragedy, there is power in community, resilience, and the fight for justice. We can't change what happened to Sa, an activist said at a memorial event, but we can honor her by ensuring that her story sparks the change she deserved. Her light may be gone, but her legacy will guide us forward. Tuza Ong's story has left an indelible mark on society, transcending her tragic death to become a symbol of resilience, justice, and hope for change. While her life was tragically cut short, the ripple effects of her legacy continue to inspire action and reflection in Thailand and beyond. From the courtroom to grassroots movements, Sa's impact is a testament to the power of one life to ignite meaningful reform. For those who knew Sa personally, and for the thousands who followed her on TikTok, she was more than a social media star. She was a beacon of positivity, an example of resilience in the face of adversity, and a reminder that dreams can flourish even in the most challenging circumstances. Sa showed us what it meant to live with joy and determination, her closest friend shared. She faced so many challenges, but she never let them define her. Her strength will always inspire us. Her followers, many of whom saw themselves in her journey, have carried her story forward, using her life as a rallying cry for justice and change. In the wake of Sa's death, her family, friends, and supporters turned their grief into action. They have worked tirelessly to ensure that her legacy brings about lasting change, focusing on key areas such as domestic violence prevention, migrant worker protections, and social justice. Sa's Foundation. Sa's family launched a foundation in her name to provide resources for women at risk of domestic violence. The foundation offers shelters, counseling services, and legal aid, helping survivors rebuild their lives while raising awareness about coercive control and abuse. Advocacy campaigns. Advocacy groups have used Sa's story to push for systemic reforms. From educational programs in schools to public awareness campaigns, these efforts aim to prevent similar tragedies and empower individuals to recognize and address abuse. Community involvement. Sa's supporters have organized events, fundraisers, and social media campaigns to keep her memory alive. These initiatives have not only honored her legacy, but also united communities in the fight against gender-based violence. Sa's case highlighted significant gaps in Thailand's social and legal systems, sparking calls for reform that have begun to take shape. Domestic violence protections. New legislation has been proposed to expand the legal definition of abuse to include coercive control. ensuring that psychological and emotional forms of violence are recognized and penalized. These changes have been accompanied by increased funding for victim support services, support for migrant workers. SA's story underscored the unique vulnerabilities faced by migrant workers, leading to policy changes aimed at improving their rights and protections. These reforms include access to healthcare, housing, and legal representation, as well as efforts to combat exploitation and abuse. Judicial training, law enforcement, and judicial officials are undergoing specialized training to better understand the dynamics of coercive control and gender-based violence. These programs aim to ensure that future cases are handled with sensitivity and thoroughness. While Saw's story is rooted in Thailand, its impact has reached a global audience. Advocacy groups around the world have used her case as a catalyst for discussions about gender equality, domestic violence, and the intersection of power and privilege. International movements. Saw's story has inspired similar campaigns in other countries, highlighting the universal nature of the issues she faced. Her case has become a touchstone for global efforts to combat violence against women and promote systemic change. Media representation, documentaries, podcasts, and articles have chronicled SA's life and legacy, ensuring that her story continues to reach new audiences. These narratives have sparked important conversations about societal norms, systemic flaws, and the power of resilience. Cross-cultural solidarity. Saw's case has united people across borders, fostering a sense of shared purpose and determination to create a world where stories like hers are no longer possible. Saw's journey began on social media, and it is through this platform that her legacy continues to thrive. Her followers have transformed her TikTok account into a space of remembrance and advocacy, using her videos to inspire action and keep her memory alive. A digital memorial. Saw's TikTok account has become a digital memorial with followers posting tributes, sharing her story, and reflecting on the lessons she taught them. Her videos, once a source of joy, now serve as a reminder of her indomitable spirit. Amplifying awareness. Social media campaigns such as Justice for Saw and Her Story Lives On have brought attention to the systemic issues her case revealed. These movements have mobilized millions, turning grief into collective action. A platform for change. Influencers, activists, and everyday users have used social media to amplify SA's story, ensuring that her legacy remains a driving force for change. Through these efforts, her impact continues to grow, reaching new corners of the world. For many, Saw's story is a reminder that even in the face of tragedy, there is hope. Her life, though tragically cut short, has inspired a movement dedicated to creating a better, safer world for future generations. Saw's legacy isn't just about her death, a social activist said. It's about the life she lived, the light she shared, and the change she continues to inspire. Her story has touched hearts and opened eyes. It's up to us to carry it forward. As the world moves forward, the lessons of Saw's story remain as relevant as ever. Her death has highlighted the need for systemic change. Her life has inspired countless others to fight for justice, and her legacy continues to serve as a beacon of hope in the struggle against inequality and violence. We can't change what happened to Sa, her brother said during a recent memorial, but we can make sure her story inspires the change she deserved. Her light will never fade because it lives on in all of us. Tuzar Ong's life may have been tragically cut short, but her impact is eternal. Her story has ignited a movement for justice, inspired reforms, and united communities in the fight for equality and safety. Sa's legacy is a testament to the power of resilience, the strength of community, and the enduring impact of one remarkable life.